Then we also already. So you've got All
right. Good morning, everyone. Thursday morning, water and health. We made it. Thank you for joining this session. My name is Ryan Kronk. I'm with the Water Institute. Hello to everyone joining online or watching this video later. This session is on the practical uses of groundwater monitoring and modeling data for WASH researchers and practitioners. I think this will be an exciting and interesting interactive discussion. We're going to start off with a quick overview, have a few case studies, and then on the back end, we'll have a brief panel discussion, and then a little bit of interactive dialogue with you all working in groups. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Allison Gregory.
Thanks, Ryan. Good morning, everyone. If you have a second to scan our QR code, we would love that. Just get an idea of who's here to when we break into discussion groups. Let's see the cameras go down. Thank you for doing that. And our virtual participants too, please scan the QR code, let us know where you're coming from in the chat box. So I'm just going to start off by introducing myself and my organization. My name is Allison Gregory. I'm the Director of Monitoring and Evaluation for the Water Project. We work to provide reliable water access for communities, schools, and healthcare facilities in Kenya, Uganda, and Sierra Leone, with a focus on specific sub-counties and chiefdoms. We work with local partners in these different focus areas, and in each area, we're implementing different source types based on the context. In all of these areas, we are utilizing groundwater sources, and each region has its own distinct challenges. For example, where we work in Sierra Leone, we see some saltwater intrusion issues when we drill, and we also see seasonal fluctuation of the groundwater levels. In southeastern Kenya, where it's extremely dry, we see pretty low water table levels, and so we actually implement sand dams and hand dug wells there instead of drilling boreholes. We monitor our water points 4 times per year, so we collect quite a bit of data. But collecting the right data and knowing how to use it properly can be challenging, especially when it comes to groundwater. So to help us overcome this challenge, the Water Project engaged some fantastic organizations to help us understand what data we should be collecting and how best to use it. Particularly in the context of our Western Kenya program, where we've recently started doing more borehole drilling. We've engaged with UNC on how to use groundwater data for modeling. We've also been working with groundwater relief to learn how to better collect groundwater data. So you'll be hearing from both of those co-conveners and our co-conveners from Millennium Water Alliance and Colorado University Boulder today. I'll let each of those organizations introduce themselves throughout the presentation. I'm just going to start by giving just a little bit of background. Groundwater management is essential for achieving SDG 6 by ensuring the availability and sustainable management of water resources. Groundwater is a significant source of fresh water, especially for communities that have that usually rely on surface water or rainwater, but are impacted by seasonal fluctuation in those sources. It's also helps to sustain agriculture. It's an important part of our food production system, industry, and maintain healthy ecosystems. We're facing a crisis in many parts of the world as extraction and climate change are threats to long-term sustainability of groundwater resources. Proper management of groundwater resources starts with regulations and rules coupled with rigorous monitoring to prevent over-extraction and ensure sustainability. However, in low resource settings, this can be challenging, where safeguards may be limited or absent. This side event focuses specifically on low resource settings, so we can unpack how monitoring data can be used most effectively within these unique challenges. We have 3 main objectives for today, all within the context of low resource settings. So first, we'd like to identify and discuss established methods for practical groundwater data collection, analysis, and visualization. Our 3 case study presenters will be talking to us about how they collect data, how to conduct analysis, etc. You'll be hearing from them. They're the experts. They'll be setting the stage for our talk today. We also want to categorize practical uses for groundwater data and talk about barriers and opportunities to using groundwater data effectively. And we'll really be unpacking these objectives through a panel and group discussions. WASH organizations specializing in research and practice have distinct needs and complementary skills. And we're looking forward to hearing from both practitioners and researchers today, really unpacking these challenges together. Very quick overview. We'll be starting with 3 case study presentations. We're going to do a panel discussion. So during the case studies, if you have any questions for the presenters, just write those down, hold on to them. You'll get a chance to ask during the panel discussion. And then we'll be concluding with group discussion activities where we're really excited to hear from all of you. If you didn't get the QR code, it's up there again. And yeah, thank you.
Great, thanks, Al. Right, so for our case studies, first up, we have Sylvia Landa from UNC. Sylvia's one of our PhDs, come on up, Sylvia. She's one of our PhD students. She does wash policy research, but she's also an incredibly talented groundwater modeler. So we're excited to have her present on some work that she did. Oh, it's already baked in. Perfect. Okay.
Thank you, Ryan. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this early morning. I'm Sylvia Landa, a PhD student at UNC Chapel Hill. If you were in my session yesterday, I will be explaining similar experience, but from slightly different angle. I'm going to focus on the use of open source data and software for groundwater modeling with example from our project in Kenya. And before I start, I want to thank you, my co-authors, and all the support I get from the Water Project and UNC Water Institute for this project. This project was initiated by collaboration with the Water Project organization, who is working in Kakamega and Vihiga counties in Western Kenya, and they're now starting to prioritizing carefully vetted groundwater system to better support sustainability and reliable year-round water access in their region. And this is our study area. We are focused in Kenya, and we zoom in. This is the watershed boundary we specifically focus on. We did not focus on the administrative boundary because to model, we need to mimic the natural hydrology size. And from the picture, we can see there is variability in the geological characteristic in the area. This picture on the left side is the map of the transmissivity, which is vertical rate of how the groundwater flow. And because of that, we also have a better reason to say we need to better understand the groundwater characteristic in the area. And my presentation today will be focusing on identifying open source data and software that can be used to model basic groundwater model, and then under how we can use that to better understand sustainable extraction for decision making. As Alison explained, sometimes in low resource setting, this kind of modeling is not easy to conduct, and we are exploring what's possible from free software, free data that we can gather online, but also using limited field data to combine those information. So from field data, the Water Project organization collected the water level, well depth, and the characteristic of the soil when they're drilling the wells, and also from the type of soils they identify when they drill the wells, which have the range of the type of hydraulic conductivity of different type of soil. However, this information aren't enough, so we also use open source remote sensing data. And for the modeling itself, we use ModelMuse because it's user friendly and it's open source. It's developed by USGS, so it has massive support from the users. If you have questions, you can just post in the user group, and also it's integrated with Modflow. Modflow is 3-dimension groundwater package that's already integrated with ModelMuse, but one of its limitation is it's only limited to what's available within the software itself. But compared to other paid software, ModelMuse isn't that much of have some lacking because it's developed by USGS. So every time there is update in the Modflow itself, the ModelMuse is updated. And other potential package one can use is if you're good with scripting language. You can use Python. Some universities now focusing more on this. This is open source. You can use it for many kind of calculation because it's really good with it's already connected with Modflow, but also you can add your own equation, and you can also explore different ways to visualize your results. So from in the right side, you can see there are different way for model use. It was really simple visualization, but for FlowPy, it can be really creative, and it's really flexible and versatile to develop different models. And there are other potential open source software to model groundwaters. With interest of time, I will not explore this, but these different software have different purposes. But for this project, we use model use because it's easier to transfer the knowledge for our partners from Kenya. And for open source data, as I said before, our field data was limited. So we use remote sensing data for the watershed boundary. For example, we use from Earth Resource Institute shapefile. There's also NASA data for the digital elevation and precipitation also from NASA, and FR for transpiration also from NASA, and the root zone soil moisture also from NASA. So these are the options that one can use. And if your data needs a little bit more tweak, you can use QGIS, which is free open source for remote sensing data analysis and exploration. This is specifically for this project, how we use the data to be transferred to our model. I would, if you have a question about this, I can discuss more with you because of interest of time. I will not go detailed for it. And at the end, this is how our data finally combined with our free software, free open source data, and limited field data collection result in a diagnostic process of predicting the impact of drilling new boreholes in the area and how we can better understand. For example, if you want to build in different location, what's the impact of pumping around 200 meter cubic per day to the change in the water level, and we can people who are managing this boreholes in the area will decide, do we want to drill here or do we not? So this is my presentation. I would, if there are questions, would love to discuss later. But through this, I hope even with limited data, by using open source data and software, we can better understand groundwater characteristics, and at the end, we support better water security, because groundwater isn't always easy to replenish. Sometimes it can take thousands of years. So we need to be careful in managing that. Thank you so much.
Sylvia. So our next presenter couldn't join us in person, but will join us virtually on the panel. Gerard Burrows is the CEO of Groundwater Relief. So you can just click that.
Hello, my name is Geraint Burrows. I'm the CEO of a charity called Groundwater Relief, and I'm going to be talking today about groundwater monitoring and its application in the humanitarian response. Groundwater Relief is a UK-based charity that provides technical groundwater services to humanitarian and development sectors through a global membership of over 500 groundwater experts. You can see from this map that we work mostly in Africa, some parts of the Middle East and Asia. Groundwater monitoring forms a very important component in supplying water to populations and in the management of water resources. And you can see from this pyramid how it fits into Groundwater Relief's approach, which is an approach that's very much centralized around collaboration with local water authorities and local academia. If we arrive into a place new, we would first of all compile and gather any existing information and data based on in-country data as well as data online. including remote sensing data. Where there are gaps, we then collect field data through a pilot borehole drilling, pumping tests, water point mapping, water quality testing, geological mapping, socio-economic surveys to understand water use and water needs, and geophysical surveys. Based on all this information, we would develop a conceptual understanding of the surface and subsurface environment, and then go about setting up a monitoring program to start to understand how water resources are fluctuating and changing in that system. And following that, once a year's worth of monitoring data is collected, we can think about developing models to model the systems and thereby future predict what's happening with those systems. And that all informs upon ultimately the water resource management strategy for a region. Groundwater monitoring data, you can either use manual equipment such as the dip meter or the dipper that Groundwater Leak has developed, or you can use automated and logger data, which can also be telemetric and thereby send data directly into cloud databases, etc. Groundwater Relief has developed a phone application called Water Data Rocks, which is available online now, and which we're piloting currently in Sierra Leone with the National Water Resource Management Agency. The phone app has been designed to support the collection of manual data, short-circuiting traditional approaches, which are to collect the data, write it onto a notebook, assign to an Excel spreadsheet, update that Excel spreadsheet on a regular basis, and with the phone app, it goes directly from the phone to a central database, and that database is also shared with the local water authority. This study I'm going to use to demonstrate how monitoring data is utilized in a refugee context is in Cox's Bazar. In 2017, about 750,000 Rohingya fled from Myanmar, Rakhine State, to Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. Groundwater Relief has been engaged since November of that year until now, until this year. And we've, over that period, sent over 20 groundwater professionals to Cox's Bazar to support various different charities and NGOs. In the last 5-6 years, difficult to summarize in a minute, but we've remapped the geology of the district in collaboration with Dakar University. We identified 2 large groundwater basins. We set up monitoring programs both within the mega camp in collaboration with Medicine Sans Frontières, and then a little bit later on across the whole region with the International Organization for Migration. And that monitoring involved manual and automated data collection. The monitoring data was then used to develop a groundwater model. It helped to calibrate that groundwater model of the main acts in the region. You can see on the right the impacts of the megacamp on the local groundwater environment, and a large cone of depression extending north, potentially impacting on the suction pump of the local community. That model has been handed over to the Department of Public Health Engineering and is currently being maintained by Dakar University. It's being used to support the drilling of new production boreholes, as well as being used to justify the sustainability of water supplies for the Rohingya refugees and the host community. I look forward to our discussions shortly, and thank you very much for listening.
All right, and our third talk is Dennis and Becky from Colorado Boulder. And take it away.
All right, I'll talk about our solution in East Africa. And I want to acknowledge the Millennium Alliance who's sitting in the panel today, who has been a brainchild together with the university and the Mortenson Center in developing this solution. We are primarily the Mortenson Center Global Engineering and Resilience. We provide primarily research and education center, but we also build partnerships around problems or challenges facing different regions, and we collaborate to develop solutions. I won't talk very much on this, but the message here is that this is a region, in many cases described as, low resource setting, developing countries, all of those definitions, descriptions, but really it's a region of high potential in terms of how much resources we have to develop and progress our populations there. And it's a region, however, that is very exposed to climate variability and very exposed also to high extreme events, including consecutive droughts. For instance, we're jumping into an El Niño event in the coming months, and we are just only coming up from a 6-year consecutive drought. And so these natural variabilities and especially compounded by climate change make the situation in the region quite dire when you think about adapting to societies or the populations there to environmental shocks. But it is also a region that is lagging behind in achieving sustainable development goal 6. And so different solutions, different institutions have come up with different solutions for us. And what I'm talking about today is about how we are monitoring the groundwater resource there and how we are helping local drought management agencies and humanitarian sector there, adapt societies or the people living in this region to droughts. Our solution is called the Drought Resilience Impact Platform, or short from DRIP. And DRIP is really a vision that we do see as providing yet an additional layer of information that can help us, our institutions working in this region improve water security. And we are doing this by using sensors that we install on borehole systems, and we use those sensors to monitor abstraction or borehole use. And then we couple that with satellite and other types of data to characterize use in the different regions, especially, and I'm talking about Kenya here. We had an extension in Ethiopia that fell by, due to the civil unrest and political situation there. But otherwise, we use those sensors, we use the satellites to characterize the spatial temporal borehole use dynamics. And then we couple that with now incentives, for people that are managing the boreholes, people that are repairing the water or keeping the water system infrastructure going. And we now are tapping into climate finance to make sure that our service, our DRIP service, is sustainable long into the future. We have so far achieved a number of goals. The first is that our sensors at the basic level are providing near real-time information to borehole repair teams, by providing that information about the functionality of the boreholes. But we have also gone ahead and developed a model that integrates the sensors, the satellite, and site characteristics. And we have been able to generate a gridded interpolated product like this one that can also provide estimates of where we do not have sensors, but there are boreholes or there are people living in those areas, and in one way or another will be dependent on groundwater sources or surface water sources whenever available. And so by providing that kind of product, the National Drought Management Agency are able to plug that into their decision making tools or decision processes, decision support processes, and they inform important decisions like when boreholes are broken and there isn't budget to support, so they fall back into alternative sources of water for this population and livestock, which include water tracking. But really, it's one of the important pieces of information, but it's not everything. And so when you think about the sustainability of water access for these people, you're thinking about those other important elements like funding, which is always a difficulty or always a challenge in this region, and especially when much of the budget is dependent on, much of the budget is allocated or focused on capex or capital expenditure. And so what we're thinking now through the invention of the DRIP service is to bring in climate finance, tap into climate finance and the climate markets, providing that additional funding that can keep the O&M going and also can make a sufficient budget that gives us a net profit that can be plugged into other complementary services, whether those are expanding the supply lines, for instance, from boreholes to communities, etc. And the platform that is carrying that is now called Fundi in Swahili, and so Fundi means technician, but in this case, it's an acronym for fixing and improving decisions. And so this is really a combination of the Drip Classic. It is now bringing the groundwater sustainability aspect. So we have sensors now that have been installed to monitor aquifer levels and fluctuations. We are tying that to an anticipatory actions framework that is being developed for the IGAD region, which includes Kenya and 10 other countries. And then we are also now what I talked about is through this new mechanism, setting up the carbon credit financing mechanism to be able then to have a holistic or comprehensive kind of approach to providing this service. I want to stop there, but this is we have about 5 months of data from the 10 boreholes that we've installed in Turkana, and we're hoping that we can, plug this data into the community, trying to understand, how much, what do we have, and what is the stability of our aquifers in this region. Thank you very much.
Dennis, thanks to all our presenters. We asked them for 5 minutes, and we are only 2 minutes behind, so great job. We'd like to invite our presenters to come up and sit, and we're also going to invite sit as panelists. If you all can come and grab a seat. I'm also going to invite up Spencer Boggle from the Water Project. He's the director of programs, and June Samo from the Millennium Water Alliance. She is she's a water intervention manager and market systems specialist. We'll have a quick panel discussion. Come on up, don't be shy. We're going to have a quick discussion. Durant is also still here with us. We're having slight technical difficulties getting him connected. So if you have a question for Durant, who's from Groundwater Relief, let us know. We'll relay the question to him and get that answered. So I'm going to start off with a few questions, and then if you all have questions, please get those ready, and we'll give you a chance to ask any of our panelists any follow-up on the presentations or other general questions. So one other quick thing I'm going to say is, if you haven't noticed the connections already, we're trying to talk about practical uses of groundwater data, connecting academics who are working with all big data sets and connecting those with practitioners. So UNC and the Water Project have been working together on the work that Sylvia presented, and MWA in Colorado Boulder, as you saw from Dennis's work, have been collaborating. So that's what we're trying to facilitate with this panel. So the first question I have here is for Spencer. Spencer, I'm wondering if you could talk about the components of what components of your program can groundwater data inform, and what are the limitations for its use?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. For the water projects, the data could inform what kind of projects we are implementing within a given context, and also how we can engage with the various stakeholders. We are primarily interested in groundwater data to build sustainable drinking water access. Our programmatic goal in Western Kenya, where we did the research, is to deliver full water coverage access in 4 sub-counties for communities, schools, and healthcare facilities. And such a goal requires strategic planning for the location of water points. We're moving toward technologies that will increase extraction in order to meet the demands of the water users. And we want to ensure that our program facilitates the sustainability of groundwater sources in the future. Specifically, we would like to use the data to understand where groundwater resources would support a borehole compared to areas that might be suitable for an upgrade to a solar-powered pipe scheme, or just the implementation of a solar-powered pipe scheme that may have multiple access points. It'd be nice to have a tool that would help us to understand some of those thresholds within our decision-making. Sylvia's model is a great starting point. It needs additional field data and calibration before we can use it to make the decisions, but ideally, it will help inform where we should and should not be drilling, and where we should and should not be installing pumps to increase extraction. some of the limitations of the model. It's limited because we need more data, and getting that additional data can come with its own challenges. For the UNC study, we obtained as many we obtained data on as many non-TWP water sources as possible, but that number was limited. And so in the future, we would plan to coordinate with the local government water authority just to build out the model further. In addition, data collection can be time consuming, especially if we're using and depending on enumerators that are working to fulfill other job tasks. Every time we pull a pump and open a pump head, whether that's to measure or to repair, we shock chlorinate. As many of you know, just keeping E. coli at 0 is a challenge. And so that shock chlorination, it requires up to 24 hours where the community doesn't use it. And we just want to acknowledge this, as much as we would love to have additional data, that may come at an impact of water use, and we want to balance that. We would like to balance that well. And then the final limitation that I'd mention, or the final challenge, is just that the data results might not match the preference of the water users. And this will mean either more restricted water access for water users or more expensive water access. And so we'd like to use the data to navigate those challenges well. Thanks.
Great, thanks. I'm wondering if any of the other panelists have any other reactions or comments they want to follow up on the components of your program that groundwater data can form, and any limitations. Do you have thoughts on that?
So in terms of our program, we essentially work with NGO partners to typically rehabilitate and drill boreholes. So some of the things that we've seen, and some of the things that groundwater data can inform. Can you hear me now? So some of the things that groundwater data can inform is actually the proper siting of these boreholes. So a phenomenon that we've been witnessing with many of the governments is that they spend they lose up to 40% of their investment because they drill boreholes incorrectly. They find dry boreholes and they just don't have this data, and it doesn't make sense for them. And so if that kind of data was available, it would actually help in the expenditures at the county within Kenya. And the other thing that I think would be very useful is quality. So water quality data, groundwater quality. So this data would definitely inform how we also site. So of course we have the availability, but we also have the quality component. And so we have data that's very large and very high level that says that this swath of land has fluoride, this swath of land has salinity, but it would be interesting to get more, granular data on salinity. So I think those two components would be very useful and would really help how programs are implemented.
Great, thanks for that, June. I have another follow-up question for June. MWA works with a lot of different types of stakeholders, including researchers like dentists, private sector entities, and governments. I'm just wondering what challenges you encounter in ensuring that groundwater information is both actionable and relevant for decision makers.
All right, thank you for that. And I'm really happy to be answering that question. So we've done this together. The MWA in Colorado Boulder did a program for 5 years. We developed amazing data sets and we trained our government officials and our practitioners and policymakers on how to use it. But at the end of 5 years, this data was not utilized. And I think we were very frustrated and we were trying to understand what was going on. So a little bit of interrogation revealed that there are two main factors. So one, as researchers, we tend to do the research, but we need to have more involvement of, say, university institutions within the country or the practitioners in the government, so that once we leave, they're able to utilize this data and actually action it, because we need to attach somebody with a scientific mind to the policymakers that they can refer to very quickly to be able to understand this data. So ensuring that we transfer knowledge like on the open source platforms and what's happening with different projects to actual researchers and scientists who can translate this to the policymakers is important. The second thing is finance. I know we've been talking about this, but the main reason why they didn't action some of the data, for example, Some of the sensors would say that a borehole is down and it needs to be repaired. But the problem is that the funding flow from the national government to the county government was so slow that by the time they actually actioned this repair, 2 months had passed. So the data was there, they understood the data, but they couldn't action it because of the financial flows. And so then MWA and the University of Colorado Boulder and VRD have tried to leverage climate finance to address this issue. Then another thing that we generally notice is really the incentives for practitioners and policymakers when you look at data, especially in low-income settings. They really do prioritize what is important to them. And for them, unless we really discuss with them the importance of resource management and having this data, they will go ahead and drill a borehole. You have your constituents telling you, we don't have water, we are dying. Like, would you actually reroute your funding to that? So there's a lot of education that really needs to take place on the importance of data. They need to see why it's important for them to actually action it. Then the other thing is just how we package it. So the models are really good, but I think we need to find a way to simplify it. And so going back to the project, we were using 2 different entities to generate information on groundwater data. So one packaged it in a very, very complex way, extremely complex, so much so that the system wasn't used. When we were conducting the end-term evaluation for our program, they were like, this system is complex, we stopped using it. But then there was another entity that used to send SMS alerts to the practitioners. Every morning they were told, this is the status of your groundwater, this is the status of your system, you need to fix this. They used to use that data. So we need to think of innovative ways to package it. And the last thing is what I learned at the panel yesterday. As a wash sector, we need to kind of, to some extent, play in the political realm. They're the ones who eventually call the shots. And personally, for me, I was always like, let's avoid the government. But I realized that you cannot do anything without them. So you have to also put them at the center of this. So like the small packaging, making sure that they can understand the messages, and also really lobbying and advocacy so that you can get them to understand why this data needs to be actioned. So that's, I think, what I can say on that.
That's great, thank you. Any other reactions from the panelists, including Jerron, who we finally have connected? Feel free to chime in. Any other thoughts? Okay, go ahead.
Add a bit. Totally. I totally agree that better data will be helpful for decision making. And I also work in a nonprofit before. Sometimes I've witnessed people drill holes and it's end up not having water, and not only the people who drill the hole who were disappointed, but the community was so they're really expecting to get water, but they didn't get any. And having a better data to know before they start drilling is really important. And one of your comment about salinity, and actually the model use that we use is not only modeling where we can pump the water level, but it has, let me read the name. There's some package called MT3D from USGS that you can model for contaminant transport. So we can also model using that free software for this area has, if we have data for the type of the salinity level, we can predict which area are having this different level of salinity and other potential contamination, E. coli and etc. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm wondering if we have any questions from the audience for our panelists on any of the presentations. Yes.
Hi, thank you all very much. My name is Jeremy Lake from Martin International. I think June started talking about this, but how are you then taking this really valuable data and making it locally available? It seems to have applications beyond even borehole drilling and wash, but the agriculture, animal husbandry, and environmental protection.
Thank you.
No, go ahead.
So the key question that we wanted to solve with our sensors initially was, can we provide information ahead of borehole breakdowns? You know, that was the primary reason. And when we thought about the sensors being able to provide that near real time, we thought that we had a solution. But then it came to the point where we thought about what are the other uses then of that sensor data beyond sending it to technicians who can then prioritize and schedule their repairs. And that's what we thought about. Well, we can work also with the National Drought Management Agency to provide estimates of other places where we do not have sensors, and usually it's not cost effective to send people around to scout for what is happening in these boreholes. And also to be able to provide estimates of elsewhere where possibly there's increased demand, especially during the dry season. There's a way of preventing or mitigating catastrophes to people and their livestock. So our sensors are in a region where people move around a lot with their livestock, and we initially installed borehole sensors on strategic routes, migratory routes, but really there are also people moving just to get water for household use. And so there are other opportunities that we saw with these sensors to utilize that data. So when we send the data, we send it primarily to the water services and the drought management agencies, but some of the borehole systems also serve irrigation. But our intention is not really to monitor that, but and also because our region is not very well known for obstructing groundwater for irrigation. And so, but we do think that as these resources is developed further, there will be possibly expansion of such interventions to provide food security to these populations there. And so our data may be of more use than just what we have focused on or attended to so far.
I have now remembered. So with another partner that we're working with, we are trying to understand what catchment protection activities can take place. So the data is being used to inform community activities. We have entities known as water resource use associations. So sometimes they don't really know how to protect their catchments. So we have developed something known as resource recharge maps with another entity that we're working with. And then we train the community on some of these maps, and we advise them that this is where you need to maybe build a gabion or dig a zai pit or small things like that. And then we also work with and then that's also used to inform how they do their fodder. So when we dig half moon bands, they can also plant seeds there and water that. So that data is being used to inform where those activities are taking place. Then we also work with the institutions, the Water Resource Authority. They take this data so that as the communities are doing this work, they also have the data so that they can provide oversight to some of the communities. So I think that's how we also kind of try and localize the data.
Sharon, I think you've got a response too. You might just need to unmute.
Yeah, hello everybody. Nice to join you virtually. I'm sorry I can't be there, but that's the problem with going to a country like Yemen. You end up not being able to get visas so easily to get to the US. But no, just to add to what the first speaker said on that question. I mean, trying to put data into authority databases, it has to be the best way to ensure that data is available in the longer term. And so at the start of a program, we would be looking at what the structure is of an authority's database, what data they actually collect in the first place, and then make sure that whatever data that we're collecting in any kind of program would be able to fit into that structure ultimately when you hand it over. And obviously it's an added advantage because if you can engage authorities' databases in advance, then you can get hold of their data too, hopefully, and that will inform your program. But just to add to what the first speaker said.
Great. We actually have two really good questions come in on the chat. I want to ask the panelists as well. The first one is for data collection and reporting, are there major issues with connectivity for uploading data in the field? So a very practical question. And second, since many private wells are not on the record, how do you account for those when assessing water use and forecasting sustainability? If anyone wants to jump in and respond to those.
Yeah, there are many technologies are great, but there are many challenges, and challenges are unique to where you implemented these technologies. In our region, especially in this specific region, these are areas that experience conflicts a lot, conflicts over resources, conflicts, political conflicts as well. And so whenever you bring a technology that requires you to collect data locally and then send it somewhere, people get a little concerned about what you're sending out. And so one of the challenges that we face with our sensor technology is being able to build sufficient trust, especially with governments. In the case in Ethiopia, for instance, our sensors are out there, but Ethiopia is one of, especially the north and the areas close to Somalia, the challenges, security challenges are enormous there. And so whenever you have an intervention that is collecting data locally, the government was very averse about what you're collecting and who you're sending that data to. So they were looking at it from a security perspective. So it took a lot of talking and convincing. The other one is that in the case of Kenya, and in many cases, vandalism is also a problem. You install a gateway today, it collects data, it's working very well. You move to the next site, and then the next time you're looking at your dashboard, it's offline. And you obviously think about possibly that's theft or someone just destroying it. And we have had these cases, but over time that has gone down really fast because we really have engaged and continue to talk to the people and to build that ownership, and we have had quite some success there. In terms of data uplink cases, so in some cases you have cellular connection, and so you can use gateways that utilize the GSM, mode to send data, but we have shifted from that more into having our sensors connected with satellites directly, so that you navigate, at least you overcome that challenge, especially in places where you do not have cell towers that cover enough areas to cover all of your boreholes that you're monitoring or you're interested in. But those are the main challenges. Security is connected to how much data you can also collect and send to your servers. That's the second question.
I think I could try. Mine is just a quick one. I think for handling private boreholes, it's just good to understand who has what data. So there is a lot of data out there. I think what we realized is that there's an issue of collation of data. Over time, we realized that there's collection by USAID, USGS, private entities. So the data is scattered all over the place. So at some point, there's a lot of overlap. For example, in Isiolo County within Kenya, there was mapping done by an NGO in 2013. In 2017, mapping was followed up. So there's been a lot of mapping. So it's just for you to get some of these private boreholes, it's just ensuring that you have these repositories or just investigate who has done this collection. Then you collect the data sets, because within that, you will find that. Then also the Water Resource Authority, the national management structure, also has data that you can, unfortunately, you have to purchase it, but data that you can purchase. So if you're a private borehole owner, you have to go through them. Yeah.
This is one of the question actually we explore with the water project in when we started the project. Is our data cover everything in the water set area? Because it will actually agree with the question, it will impact the accuracy of how we're predicting the groundwater level behavior. And initially we only use the water project data, but then we tried to email, the local field team tried to connect with government, and we got also other government data, but because of the limitation, we couldn't really put everything in the model. For example, if someone drilled new wells in their yard, we cannot know that before they report to the government or before someone actually come. And although we didn't have perfect information of that, the way we deal with that limitation in the model is to calibrate the model itself. We didn't calibrate the data in terms of making sure all the data were perfect, but the model we calibrate between what we simulate and what we observe. So for example, we say the water level is like this in the model. What was the observation in the field? So the calibration at the end was a key, but also understanding the limitation. The more boreholes information we get, it will be easier to observe a more bigger R square, like a linear and perfect correlation between our observation and our simulation. But yeah, I do agree it's limitation, but there are a small way we can do to deal with that. Thank you.
Wonder if we have time for maybe one more question from the audience, if someone's got, yes.
Great, thanks everyone, this was great. I think I had kind of one thought I'd love to get your response to on one question. So from the water sector, we're always trying to get money to send people water points, to fix them, to improve the quality and things like that. So it sounds like there may be potential to kind of create some more value by helping improve our understanding of groundwater levels. And so I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on that, how it can practically be integrated. And then the other question I just had is there a case study that comes to mind where you say, okay, this is the national government who's taken on this charge of what you're talking about and done it in a sophisticated way, where it's not just sort of static, snapshots once every 5 years, but really sort of like day-to-day management of kind of fluid systems.
I think I can respond to the first part of that question, and getting the data is a challenge, as we recognized, and so as we move forward, we would be looking for efficiencies to see, as we're making a repair, as we're doing quarterly monitoring, can we sync this with the work that we're already doing, to reduce the number of times we're shot chlorinating, to reduce the number of trips and just the expense of going out, within our program area. Some of the sites may be, 2.5, 3 hours away. We would want to coordinate just the access to that data with the other data that we're already collecting. So that would be the first opportunity to do that. And as far as national precedent, I'll hand it over.
Yeah, so because an intervention has to respond to a need somewhere, and while we build our services, engagement is very important for us to prioritize what we can solve with our technologies. And at the moment, like I've demonstrated here, is that we only cover part of the country. That is not to say other people are not covering other places, but when you think about scaling, and I think this is a question about scaling, it is, let me use the analogy of meteorological observations. Africa is also, again, as a continent, lagging behind in being able to have sufficient or enough sessions observing what is happening to the atmosphere, and when you think about rainfall versus something like a localized phenomenon like groundwater availability, you're thinking about having to need even more resources for you to be able to put sensors. These sensors are not cheap. If you want automatic sensors, it's in the ranges of thousands of dollars. And so when you think about how you can scale such an intervention and be able to provide, that continuous regular information about the aquifer state, then you're thinking about, how much capital you have to spend, allocate into establishing that infrastructure. It's not that it is undoable, but one of the challenges is that we still are trying to understand how much water we have and where that is, and that is an effort that is ongoing now. USGS, Kenya, for instance, Acacia Water, USGS now in Ethiopia. So once, what our colleague talked about with groundwater relief is just trying to understand, where is that resource first, before we can then come up with strategic representative points where we can have operational monitoring, even as we provide these static every 2 years states. Yeah, but it is an intervention that really is. You have to think about all of these dynamics that can provide and optimize how much information you provide to the government and whoever else is using it.
Yeah, go ahead, Sharon, you get the last word.
Yeah, I would just say that doing snapshots of groundwater level data, for example, would be very tricky because it depends on the time of day when you take the water level measurement. It depends on what's happening with the pump at the time. It depends on rainfall, the seasonality, etc., etc. That will be dependent on what that water level is at that moment in time. And of course, the whole point of capturing monitoring data is to see the entirety of the seasonality, the entirety of what's happening with each water point. That's the value of the monitoring data. to see the processes in action. So snapshots are probably less valuable than long-term monitoring at particular boreholes and wells. And obviously, you know, it's about then how do you maintain and manage long-term monitoring. And so it's really then about how you fund long-term monitoring, looking at not just you know, a one-off, but looking at 5, 10 years, 15, 20 years of collection of data.
Great, thank you so much. That was really interesting discussion. I do want to make sure we have enough time for our discussion. How we're going to do this, I think we've got 40, just under 45 people. I think maybe 5 groups, or 5 groups. I think if we can try to break into 5 groups, roughly clustering, 2 can use the marker board. We have poster boards that will hand out to the other groups. So our panelists are going to be some of our discussion leaders. We've got discussion questions for some are aimed at more researchers, some are aimed at more implementer. You can choose which, if you want to pretend to be one group or answer both groups. The most important thing is our last question. We really want to make sure that you get to. We're going to give you a 3 or 5 minute warning to make sure if you haven't gotten to the last question, you get to it. Are there any other?
Jason will be our fifth.
Okay, Jason, yeah, 4 and Jason's the 5th. So we're going to practice this conference. I think one of the themes that has emerged is clearly and succinctly communicating science in very salient short points. So our report out, what you're going to do is you're going to appoint someone to be your spokesperson, and you're going to report out in like a minute or less than let's say a minute report out, and you're going to report maybe your 3 to 5 most salient points as succinctly as possible. So we're going to practice what we've been learning at the conference this year, and we're going to have also note takers. We are planning on rapidly turning the outputs of this session into a white paper, which you might even be able to share an early draft of it with you all if you sign up on the QR code. So we'll get the QR code back up if you'd like to get that. So yeah, we'll make sure that all the other points that your groups discuss are captured and we synthesize and get this written up. So why don't we go ahead and try to break into groups and we'll distribute our leaders.
So we got 3 note takers. And I volunteered. Yeah. Are you not? Otherwise, I would be because you know what to do. There's 300 Google form.
We're back live with our virtual participants. Do we have a volunteer group who would like to go first? Or is sneaking in their last few. Maybe if you want to come up to the front, on the mic, this mic is a little louder.
Notes for my group, so I was volunteered to synthesize them. I'll start by saying we had a mix of researchers, practitioners. We had a loss editor in the group, so that was an interesting perspective. We talked mainly about I'll say connections between groundwater and other wash subsectors. So someone in the group used groundwater data to explore impacts of different types of sanitation systems. So really thinking about the loops between the W and the S in wash. Something else we talked a lot about is the format that groundwater data are stored in. Are they on paper? What language are they in? What indicators were used? And can those indicators can those data sets using those indicators be combined with other data sets? Because something that we talked about are static data sets, how useful are static data that were collected even 1 year ago, how useful are they today, and what systems exist for continually updating them with all of these data that everyone in this room and outside the room are collecting. How did I do?
Great.
Okay.
Okay. Data gaps, longitudinal data on groundwater levels, water quality, specifically around holophages. And then barriers are technology that are resilient in harsh conditions. Government uptake, whether at the state, like US state level or national state level, to require measurements of these things that are missing. That's it.
Oh, brilliant.
I was pretending I was a PowerPoint slide.
All right.
So our group here was reporter. So the implementation, some of the use case scenarios. Some of the use case scenarios we discussed were risk analysis, site selection, technology selection and application. And also one interesting one that came up was using it for advocacy, but also health monitoring and prediction. Some of the we also used it for impact tracking and monitoring depletion and communicating risks to communities and government. Data is usually collected through direct observation and at points, so not really continuous monitoring. Data is usually often goes through government filters of what they consider acceptable data. So even if the data is collected, it's not necessarily being, collated or the word. Some of the challenges are a lack of data depositories. Again, the point data, data ownership, and a lack of leadership, a lack of an entity that takes lead, whether it be government or otherwise. Some of this one noted success was the platform for standardization in Haiti that was led by the government, and that was made a national requirement. Some of the resources that are required to be more successful include data sharing incentives. So how do you incentivize people to actually not hoard their data? Having some sort of a common platform, or even I would even say a common data language, or using having standards from the government, and also about government buy-in on this, And just capital for continuous monitoring, so not just point monitoring, but how do we observe these things over time?
Well, so we comprise these packages to the 4 different points. So to start, we talked about where groundwater sources come from, and some of them were national, some of them came from government organizations and NGOs. And then I think a common theme of our conversation is just how decentralized this data is, and who has access to it, and how can we use it. So some data gaps. Some areas like in the DRC have complete lack of data in some places. So we talked about how NGOs and government officials can come together and share their data. NGOs may be collecting the data, I think was an idea, and then government kind of being the holder of the data. And some possibilities of the future collection, they need oversight, maybe a government agency, as I shared, incorporating local knowledge and their insights, expanding applications of existing data, and some challenges, again, sharing, communication, and lack of access.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much for a great discussion and for hanging with us all morning. Like I mentioned, we are going to, hopefully we've captured all the notes. Please we'll get the marker boards. If you would like to get a draft of this white paper, I think we can probably share a preliminary version. And I'm not going to commit to a timeline because I'm probably going to sleep a lot next week. But we would, we'd love to share that with you all for feedback. This is one of the new things we're trying to do at the conference, is to make sure that the fantastic discussions that are happening in this room are captured and being proliferated to the sector to keep improving performance and practice. So grab the QR code or come find me and I'll give you my email address and we can get you to the list. But thank you so much for joining. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, Ray.